Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for those who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of your life. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. One of the single biggest points of leverage in a person's life is one that is often overlooked and taken for granted, and that is trust. If you want to dramatically increase your success and effectiveness as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a spouse or partner in a relationship, and with your customers, you must begin that process at the level of trust. You know, if you drive down to the core of who we are as a social species, trust is the most valuable asset in the world because trust means safety. Trust is often the difference between life and death. A lack of trust is what allows us to avoid dangerous people or situations. And it's also what allows us to function as a society as we drive down a road towards each other at 70 miles an hour with nothing more than a painted line that separates the two of us. When you have trust, you can let your guard down. It means you can turn off the security guards in your brain that keep you on alert and looking for danger, and allow yourself to go into the part of your mind that's creative and abundant. When people trust each other, it creates speed of efficiency because you know that you can count on the other person to do what they said they were going to do. It creates loyalty with customers who learn that they can trust you and your company to keep the promises that you've made. So your goal is to become the high trust person and brand in your marketplace. If you can establish trust over time, you will win. So to help us learn more about trust is the man who literally wrote the book on the subject, Stephen M.R. Covey. Stephen is the heir to the Franklin Covey empire. He is the CEO of one of the largest and most successful business consulting firms in the world, and he's here today to teach you how to take your life and your business to the next level by becoming a person and a brand of trust. This is one of the most valuable interviews that we've ever had on the show, so please get ready to take some notes and help me welcome Stephen M.R. Covey. Stephen M.R. Covey, welcome to Self-Made Man. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here today.
Hey, thanks so much, Mike. I'm happy to be with you.
Absolutely. So I'm incredibly excited about our interview today because, you know, your father had a huge impact on myself when I got involved in the personal development industry and millions of other people with probably his most well-known book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And you know, he's now passed away a few years ago. You've really taken over the reins. I've been really interested to dive into, you know, how the two of you built Franklin Covey as a media company, as an education company, to the success that it's been over the last few decades, considering that that is one of my goals and current objectives. So thanks so much again for taking the time to join us today and to walk us through that process. This is a really rare opportunity.
Absolutely. I'm really happy to, Mike. And it really has been and is an exciting ride with a lot of learnings along the way. As my father, created such extraordinary content, we tried to figure out the best ways of getting that out. And so that's kind of our story of how we built the business around it. I think is a very interesting story in and of itself, apart from my father's work and the work that I've done with trust as well, to try to have good ideas. How you turn that into a business is another interesting story. So I'm really excited to talk about that too.
So let's go back to the beginning. Where did Franklin Covey begin?
Yes, well, it began with, let me go back to, because there ended up being a merger of two companies, Franklin Quest, which is the day planner company, and then Covey Leadership Center, which is what my father built and the like. So I'll go back to the Covey side of this and the Covey Leadership Center days. We were at the time a small leadership development company doing leadership development work, some speaking, some training, a little bit of consulting around how to develop leaders. And it was established, 1984, and it was heavily dependent upon my father. He'd be the one that would have to go out and give the speech. He'd go out and do the leadership development training. And, he was really good at it. He had great ideas. This was before the 7 Habits book was published. That didn't happen until 1989. So for about 4 or 5 years or so, the company existed, and it was heavily dependent upon my father. And the problem was that you couldn't scale it, right? And it could only go as as big as my father could be, and he could only be in one place at a time. And so we started to run into that problem. So we thought, well, what if we were to create other people like my father that could do this, that could be great presenters and great facilitators, teachers, coaches, and consultants in leadership development. And so we started doing that path, and that was terrific because it worked. There were other great people that we added as part of the team, and they could go out and kind of present to companies and do just as good a job as my dad was doing. And the clients were really happy. And so that enabled us to suddenly leverage ourselves and scale ourselves, beyond just my dad. But then the thought was, what if we could do this one more level? What if we could actually have the client teach this themselves? And in particular, let's just use 7 Habits as an example. Rather than having to have my dad come in to teach and to train the leadership in 7 Habits, and rather than having one of our other great facilitator consultants go in to train it, what if we license the client to be able to teach this material themselves to their own people? And what if we certified people within the client to do this? Now, today, this sounds quite commonplace, Mike, but I'll tell you what, in the 1980s, this was radical. The idea that we could certify the client to do this themselves, and they would just buy materials from us. And so we started going down that path and created a train the trainer, a certification. And then we really tried to make the course, the training materials, to be really user-friendly so that someone without the same level of expertise and experience in the field could be able to train the course effectively. And that's what we were able to do. And when we did that, it changed everything. And the whole economics of the business changed because now we could really scale ourselves and reach a lot of people.
Well, you know what it sounds like is that y'all really started with a B2B business instead of business to consumer. Yes,
we did, because that was the primary buyer, is the business buyer. And we really were focusing on them, and it was B2B all the way through. Then what happened is, though, because it's leadership development type work we were doing, and because it's individuals that make up a team and an organization, a lot of the individual users were just that. They were individuals. They were consumers. And so, yes, they got it through the team, through the company, but how it impacted them was often personal. So we began to see that we have our business buyer, which is the organization that we were selling to, but we also have all of the individuals going through the training, getting this, that they might have their own interests in their home, in their community, in their neighborhood, with their family, and the things that they want to do. And that's when we said, well, we can also see them as a customer and have products and tools for them, be it audio tapes or day planners and other things that they could use individually apart from whether they got it through their company. And we did begin to say, we really are in 2 businesses. We're in the organizational business with the B2B buyers, organizational buyers, and they're buying leadership development training. They're buying effectiveness. They're buying a result within their business. But then we also have our individual users, the consumers that want a happier life, want to be more effective, more productive in their life. Yes, at work, but also personally. And if we see them as a consumer, we have a B2C business, and we can go there. And that was really critical to kind of have both paradigms that we're really in 2 businesses. We clearly started just B2B, that we broadened it. And that helped, again, grow our business dramatically.
Yeah, but B2B is usually a great way to start because you can charge higher prices to businesses than you can individuals for the most part. So I would assume the profit margins are higher, revenues higher with a fewer number of actual customers, which is a great place to be as a new company.
Yes, there's no question. And in fact, even within the B2B market, the organizational market, we found that we first found our footing with businesses, and then we later expanded it to other kinds of organizations. like education organizations and government organizations and healthcare. But we started with the business because we were able to innovate best there and also get higher margins there. It enabled us to do other things in education where the margins were a lot lower because our pricing was a lot lower. And that's appropriate for that market. But it did spawn all of that. But the one I would say this, that there kind of was that breakthrough of recognizing that we're in two businesses, organizational effectiveness and personal effectiveness, B2B and B2C. And having that paradigm shift was really big. But I want to come back to how this game changed for us when we suddenly said we can license and certify our clients. Because what happened, Mike, is we went from training a few thousand people a year where my dad was doing it to 10,000 plus a year when we were doing it to 250,000 people a year when the client was doing it. Mm. And, so dramatic changes in scale. And we would get less revenue per person because, we're not sending our people out to do the training, but we were impacting people. The impact on the people was greater. The impact on the organizations was greater. And it really made a profound difference. And that was a big shift. And it sounds commonplace today because people license and certify, and we see software companies and what they do. At the time to do this in leadership development, we were ahead of our time as we saw this model. And that really enabled us to scale ourselves in a way that we hadn't been able to do prior to that.
I'm going to throw out what might be a pretty challenging question here, but your answer is just going to be equally as valuable. If a company like, let's just use ours for example, was looking to scale and become a leader in the personal development and publishing industries here in the years to come, what would your advice be given how things have changed when it comes to the internet, when it comes to marketing, and when it comes, frankly, to culture today, American culture here over the past, let's say 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. There's a lot that's going on today. I would say this, that the principles still apply. The practices maybe are influenced heavily by changing technologies and the different things that are taking place, but the principles are, you're still trying to have content that is meaningful and content that works. And for us, it was, principle centered content. And even in a changing world, there's still a need for principles for something that doesn't change. And so having principle centered content was kind of our niche and focus on inside out. In other words, you build this from the inside out, meaning we look in the mirror, we start with ourselves always. Was those two pieces, principle centered, inside out was kind of our distinctiveness. But then we would try to look at the different mediums that would be appropriate. And so the examples I gave were, back in the 80s, it was a big idea to do certification and licensing, and that still remains critical today. But today with technology and all kinds of things you can do online that you couldn't do before, that you can do really well, you have a whole variety of different mediums that you might scale yourself and do different things with and license people and have an ability to really do far more and have different modalities and mediums and means than ever before. But you still, to me, I would say it still needs to come back to having, a clear idea of what it is that you stand for, the job to be done, what problem you're trying to solve, what solution you're trying to give, and then have a distinctiveness to that, to how you have a good approach to that, and then let the technology and the different mediums be different modalities, different approaches of how you would do it, but you still have you've identified what you're trying to accomplish, the job to be done, so to speak, and then your distinctiveness to that, your uniqueness to that, how you approach that with a whole variety of different methodologies. And I still think that's a useful approach. And people still write and and get books, and they might not read the books as much as they used to, but the idea is that you try to be a thought leader, and you try to codify your thoughts, and that can be in the form of a book. It can also now be in the form of a TED Talk today, and but the point is you're trying to establish yourself as a thought leader in a certain area, in a certain topic, around a certain job to be done, and you might have more choices now on how you might establish that, but that's what you're trying to do first, so that you say, I have an understanding on this, and it's distinctive and unique understanding that is better, that will help people. But how I would apply it and go about it could be all over the map with different modalities of doing it. So there's far more options today. And I think that sometimes you might get confused with the options from some of the principles that remain, which is you have a distinctive approach, to have a job to be done that you're focused on, so that it's just not generic, but it's really, and it could be broad, could be as broad as leadership development, and it could be more narrow, which is building collaboration on a team. But you're trying to become, you're trying to say, we have a point of view on this, and we think it's superb, and we think it's distinctive and unique in these ways, and there's a whole variety of different ways that you can access this. And that's what's changed. That's what's dramatically changed.
Right. And I think that if you want to survive and really thrive and dominate in today's marketplace, where, as you mentioned, you've got so many other competing options, at least the consumer does, and everybody's fighting for the attention of their audience, that you have to be focused on making an impact on every single individual that you have an opportunity to, so that they become a super fan. And then you have to continue to stay in the game for, 10 plus years. And I think that time component is just a necessary ingredient that's really been a foundational piece to y'all's success as a company now for, 3-4 decades. It's hard to buy that. You really have to earn it.
I agree with what you're saying. I think that, that idea of always creating value with everyone. So everything we're trying to do is not just to draw attention, but to create value, so that every user, everyone that, whether they read the book, they go through the training, they listen, they watch the thing online, that they say there's value here that I can apply and use. I become an advocate and a champion for this, first for myself, but then I tell others about it, and the word of mouth spreads. And then to have staying power, so that this is not seen as a fad, and it's enduring. And to me, that speaks again back to principles, that fads come and go, and people can come in and out. If they're just based upon practices and fads only, they'll go in and out. But if fundamentally you're based upon enduring principles, the practices will change with different context, different technology, but the principle endures, and that enables you to endure and build a brand and some staying power, that you stand for something. And I think that's what's happened with Franklin Covey today, is that we stand for principles that you can apply in different leadership situations and contexts to get good results. And there's a track record that's kind of proven itself over time, and that helps perpetuate itself. But we can't assume it or take it for granted. We've got to constantly be improving and working on helping make sure that we can continue to add value. Because if we're not adding value at some point, then people will say, why are we buying this, or why are we doing this if it doesn't work, it doesn't help? So it does feed upon itself, but having that enduring power, the staying, that does build the reputation, the brand over time. And that's how it's built in this business.
Let me ask you this. What is the biggest challenge for your company today in these current times?
I think it's cutting through the noise and the clutter that's everywhere out there. So much noise, so much clutter, so many options, so many choices. All that's a good thing. And so cutting through that, and that's where, again, having a reputation, having a trusted brand that stands for something, and then being true to what you stand for, and such that you constantly are delivering the value that people expect from you, helps in this regard, so that you can keep the word of mouth going, which remains, the best way to grow the business. is that people talk about you and they talk about you to others. And so people are coming to you this way versus just trying to draw more attention to yourself, because there's so many people in drawing attention to themselves in so many different ways around so many different topics. There's just so much noise.
Yeah.
And it's only going to increase. And so being able to cut through that noise and the clutter, and that's where having a trusted brand, a trusted reputation with word of mouth, and that's deserved and earned because of the value that you create is a big differentiator.
Absolutely.
So that remains, at the end of the day, you got to create value. But someone could be able to create value and not be known and noticed. So that's where it feeds upon itself. Is it's got to create value, but you also need to build a brand and a reputation that's trusted to cut through the noise and the clutter, to remain noticed.
Well, I think that's the perfect transition to a topic that you know better than just about anybody. You literally wrote the book on it, which is really your biggest contribution, I think, book-wise to the brand, is The Speed of Trust. And that's a book that you wrote years and years ago. I know you've got a brand new edition coming out, a 2018 edition. Talk us through what that book is about and why it's so important.
Yeah. The interesting thing, Mike, is I found in my work with people and organizations and leaders everywhere that everyone knew trust matters, that it's important, it's a good thing. But still, for so many people, it's seen as just kind of a soft, nice to have, warm and fuzzy social virtue. And I wanted to reframe trust and let people see it for what it really is. Because again, for too many, it's just seen as soft, it's simplistic, or in other cases, it's too academic. And the reality is, trust is the most tangible, practical, actionable thing imaginable, and it's impacting everything. So I kind of wrote the book with the idea to kind of make 3 points. The first is I wanted to show how trust is an economic driver, not just a social virtue. In other words, there's a business case for trust because it always affects the speed at which we can move and the cost of everything. And when trust goes down in relationships or on teams and cultures with customers or partners, when trust goes down, the speed goes down with it. Everything takes you longer and the cost goes up. Everything costs you more. And that is a tax, a low trust tax. And in our world today, there's taxes everywhere. There's low trust taxes everywhere in relationships, on teams and organizations, in the marketplace. And I show there's hard economics to that. But the flip side is true as well. When the trust goes up in the relationships on the teams and the companies and the cultures with customers and partners, when trust goes up in any and all of those relationships, the speed goes up with it. Everything happens faster and the cost comes down, costs us less. Now that is a dividend, a high trust dividend. And Mike, it's that simple, that powerful, that predictable. The economics of trust, speed and cost are always affected. And you can put a financial value on trust. And that's a big idea because most people never thought of trust in terms of economics. They know it's social. I'm saying yes, and it's also financial. You can put a value on it. And the data is overwhelming. High trust organizations outperform low trust organizations by about 3 times in return to shareholders. So that's the first big idea. I call that the business case for trust. I make a business case for trust. The second big idea is what I call the leadership case for trust. And I'm really showing how trust is really the one thing that changes everything. If we get good at trust, it will make us better at everything else that we're trying to do as leaders, as teams, as organizations. So what are those things we got to do today? We got to collaborate. We got to partner. We got to build teams. We got to lead change. We got to attract people, retain people. We got to engage people. We got to inspire people. We got to execute our strategy. All these things that are so vital, they thrive when there's high trust and they wither and die when there's low trust. It impacts them dramatically. And think about it. Take collaboration. Without trust, people don't really collaborate. Without trust, people merely coordinate. It's trust that turns mere coordination into true creative collaboration. It's trust that turns a group of people into a team. It's trust that creates the foundation for innovation to flourish in a culture. So trust is really the one thing that changes everything. We still have to do other things that go along with it. But if we have trust, it is a multiplier, performance multiplier for everything else that we're trying to do. It's high leverage. And I call that the leadership case for trust. how trust changes everything to go along with the business case for trust, how it impacts speed and cost. And the combination of those two big ideas, the business case for trust, the leadership case for trust, kind of creates a compelling case for why this is so vital in our world today. So I make the why, and then the bulk of the book is the third big idea, which is this, that trust is a learnable skill. Trust is a competency that we can learn, a skill, something we can move the needle on, the ability to create trust, to establish it, to grow it, to extend it, to expand it, in some cases, even to restore it when it's been lost. And that's where I lay out a framework, a language, and a process of how we can build trust on purpose as leaders, as teams, and as organizations. And that's where the bulk of the book is focused, is on giving people tools and a framework and a language of how they can build trust in their world and on their team and for them as a leader. And that's exciting because, it's a low trust world. And if you couldn't build trust and grow it, we'd all be circling the drain. So this is trying to give people hope and also really a blueprint, a methodology of how to build trust intentionally at every level for them as leaders and for their team, for their organization, for their brand. And it kind of lays out how you do it, not just why it matters.
I wish we could get copies of this book into the hands of every politician in Washington and every owner of all of the major news organizations out there, because they need it. They really do.
No, Mike, you're exactly right. We need in our society at large. We are the danger of a low trust world, and that's how we might describe our world today, because we're seeing trust going down in institutions and in between people and everywhere, just like you're describing. The danger of a low trust world is that it tends to perpetuate itself, because we all become a little bit more careful, more cautious, more guarded, because none of us want to get burned, rightly so. And then people respond back, more careful, more cautious, more guarded. And we can find ourselves perpetuating a vicious downward cycle of distrust and suspicion, creating more distrust and suspicion, and everyone feeling justified in the process. And that's the danger, is that distrust is contagious. But the good news, and what I really highlight in the book, is that just like distrust is contagious, trust also is contagious, and how trust and confidence can in fact create more trust and confidence. And it can become a virtuous upward spiral. And I've seen teams and leaders and organizations that have build a critical mass of trust on their team, and find that tips, and they start to have one team build trust with another team, and pretty soon they build a high trust division and a high trust unit and a high trust culture, and then that ripples out from there to other teams. And I've seen this spread positively, and where you can really build a high trust team. And that's my focus, and is a little bit less on kind of all the reasons why it's hard to build trust, and more on how we, each of us, can look in the mirror and start with ourselves and build, and give to our team a leader that they can trust, become that kind of person, and how to extend it to others. And so we do need it in society. And the best way to start is to look in the mirror and start with ourselves.
It's just a huge opportunity right now, right? Like if we're in a low trust world, which I believe that we are, and we're seeing a downward spiral take place. And I think that is a result of the values being projected by Washington. And when I say that, I don't mean Trump or the current administration. I mean over the last 10 to 15 years in media, right? When you see the news media getting caught in a lie every single day, you just learn not to trust anyone. And so that's an opportunity. If you're willing to have integrity and to go through this process and build trust with your customer base and show and demonstrate that you're that in your marketplace, you're going to win. You're going to come out on top in a really big way. So I think this is a really core message and strategic value set that every entrepreneur needs to integrate into their business if they want to succeed moving forward.
I love it. I completely agree with you, Mike. Here's another way of putting it. In a low trust world, or let's say you're in a low trust industry, if you can be the high trust player in a low trust industry, what an advantage that is for you. What an opportunity when there's trust going down everywhere. if you can be the high trust player, get a reputation, get a brand for trust. And that's trust both for doing the right thing, but also delivering, on your promises and delivering value. So there's both a character side to trust and a competence side to trust. It's not just character only. Character is the roots, it's the foundation. But the competence also matters, that we do what we say we're going to do. We deliver the value we say we're going to deliver, and we do it in the right way. If you get that kind of reputation, that kind of brand, it's a huge advantage. It's an asset, and it will cut through noise and clutter. And that's the whole idea of a brand. A brand is really, you have a brand promise, and then you deliver on the brand promise. That builds brand equity. That's trust. It's trust with the consumer. You stand for something, that's your brand promise. You then deliver on it. You do what you say you're going to do. That builds brand equity. That's trust. You could do that for not only for your company and for your product, but for your business, your organization, for you, your reputation. And so I agree with you. In a low trust world, to operate with trust is the greatest opportunity and an advantage. And to be seen that, be known as, and build that reputation, the high trust player in an industry where you're not quite sure who you can trust. What an advantage, what an opportunity. So more than ever before, we need this, and more than ever before, this is an extraordinary advantage and opportunity in our society today.
I assume in the book that you give essentially a blueprint on how to go about establishing yourself as a high trust player in company.
Yep, absolutely. And the long and short of it is that it's got to be about our credibility and our behavior. Our credibility and our behavior is how we'll build that trust. Those are the building blocks. And you got to do it from the inside out, meaning we start with ourselves and we ripple out. From ourselves to our relationships, to our team, to our group, to our organization. Then we ripple out to the market and out to all society. So inside out is kind of the how we do it. But the what we do is we focus on our credibility, personal credibility, your team's credibility, your company's credibility, your product's credibility, and then our behavior, how we do what we do, our actions. And that combination of credibility and behavior will help a leader and a team and an organization build trust. And so I take credibility, I divide it into 4 pieces. I call them the 4 cores of credibility, 2 of which flow from your character and 2 of which flow from your competence. And then I do the same for behavior. I describe the highest leverage behaviors that help people grow trust faster. There's hundreds of behaviors that are out there. From the hundreds, we've identified the highest leverage ones. The Pareto 80-20 rule, the disproportionate to build trust faster, destroy it faster. And there's 13 called from the hundreds. Things like create transparency and clarify expectations and practice accountability and listen first, keep commitments, extend trust, etc. So 13 common sense behaviors that are not always common practice. In fact, they're not often common practice. And how leaders can really make these common practice and get good at this and develop skills around them for themselves as a leader, for their organization. Can I give you an example of this, of a company that has done this?
Absolutely.
Look at Domino's Pizza.
Mm.
A decade ago, approximately, their stock price was at $3. They were seen as having, their pizza was often confused with the cardboard, and they were fast. They had a brand promise, which was just fast delivery, and they did that. But they kind of reinvented themselves, and they took it head on. And when I look at the 13 behaviors, and I communicated with Mr. Doyle, their CEO, on this. But if you look at their behaviors, they really exhibited so many of these behaviors in action. They confronted the reality that that they needed to improve and change, and then they went about getting better. And they ended up doing advertisements on this. They were considered radical at the time because they would go out with, this was after they revamped and revised their recipe and their formula and got better and made a better tasting pizza. And they still delivered fast, but now it's better tasting. They went and did advertisements where they would film their customers, reacting negatively to a Domino's pizza, and then the new pizza would come in and they like it a whole lot better. And they advertised it, and they basically would have advertisements that said, you can go back and look on them on YouTube, that said, our pizza stunk. It was terrible. People hated it. And, they just confronted it. They were transparent. They talked straight. but we've changed. Give us a try. And there was a lot of worry that when they launched these ads, that this was going to, be disastrous to come out and be so transparent about how bad they've been and how bad tasting it was. But you know what? The customers loved the authenticity and the transparency and the straight talk and the fact that they were working on it. And their same store sales actually went up right out of the gates, that they launched these very daring and bold ads. But it wasn't just a PR campaign. They really focused on getting better at every step of the way, being transparent and talking straight and confronting the reality and keeping commitments and so forth. And the bottom line is that they dramatically turned around their sales. They dramatically turned around their company. Today, their stock price is at like $280. It's almost 90 times higher than it was 10 years ago, 9 years ago, when they underwent this change, when they really focused on building the trust of their consumers and of their people. And what Mr. Doyle mentioned to me in my communication was that the trust they built externally with the marketplace was because they also focused on building that trust internally with the workplace, with their own people. And one of their values is uncommon honesty, that they wanted to apply that not just with the customer, but with their own people and so forth. And so you build trust inside the organization. It helps you build trust outside the organization, inside out. And, you build trust with your people. It's easier to build trust with your customers. It's hard to sustain trust with customers if inside the company there's a toxic distrust, because at some point that distrust will bleed out into the marketplace, especially in today's social media world. So if you build trust from the inside out, you can impact everything. And Domino's is a great illustration of doing this and having, a great turnaround in their performance and building trust in a crowded world, and maybe where they didn't start out with that same level of trust.
Yeah, I remember that ad. I remember it, and it made headlines for the uniqueness and the daring aspect and their willingness to come out and have that kind of transparency. It was revolutionary, really.
It was revolutionary.
And the results speak for themselves. It's amazing. I always tell people, new entrepreneurs specifically, when you make a mistake, just openly admit it. You're going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes. The opportunity that you have, though, is to be completely transparent about it. Maybe share what you learned with your audience so that they can learn with you. And if you'll be willing to do that, your audience is going to forgive you no matter, what it was. And it's going to create an even stronger bond, because they're going to say, hey, I can trust Johnny, or Sarah here. Even when they make a mistake, they're going to be upfront and truthful with me. And at that point, you've really got a customer for life, because that is such a rare thing for them to find.
I love it. I agree completely, Mike. It is rare. You make it right when you're wrong. So that's one of the behaviors. One of the 13 behaviors is called right wrongs. And it's exactly what you said. It's not just that you write it. It's how you write it. You're open, you're transparent, and that builds a sense of trust. And you described it perfectly. It is rare, but when you right the wrong and you do it in a way that's open and transparent, and it takes responsibility, so you're not blaming, that you're getting better, and you write it, and they see that you're improving, and you're open about it, they trust you.
Absolutely.
And they know, if something happens, that you'll do it again. And so, yeah, sometimes, it can be a service recovery where you make a mistake, and yet you can win the customer's loyalty for life by how you respond to it. So really powerful.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I can't think of a better strategy, to implement within, again, your organization and with your customers than establishing and increasing your levels of trust. If you want to carve out your niche in the attention economy, and if you want to see a really positive long-term ROI on that activity, I really can't think of a better thing to do. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Covey. Where can people go to pick up a copy of the latest edition of the book? Should they go just to Amazon, or should they go to a specific website? What would be the best way?
Yeah, Amazon is great. We're booksellers everywhere. And then also there is a website where there's a variety of different tools and things you can look at, and videos and things that you might find helpful. It's just speedoftrust.com.
Awesome.
Speedoftrust.com. And variety of different tools that you might find useful in some fun videos. And the point is, trust is learnable. And so I'm just trying to give people a methodology, a blueprint, a framework, a language of how they can turn this into their greatest strength. And I think we need it more now than we ever have. And so what an opportunity. You put it that way. I agree with you. And what an advantage for the person that takes that opportunity. So love to help people learn more.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Stephen M.R. Covey. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for everything that you and your family have done for all of us entrepreneurs out there over the decades. And it's been an honor to have you on the show. And I can't wait to read the book. I've already got a 2010 edition, and I'm going to be picking up a 2018 edition here when it comes out in the coming weeks. And cannot wait. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Mike. Wonderful to be with you in the Self-Made Man podcast. Real
Absolutely. Honor. Absolutely. Well, guys, gals, thank you as always for listening. I really enjoyed this conversation. I highly recommend you pick up a copy of this book and you implement these strategies within your organization. Once again, I don't think there's many other things that you can do that will create the kind of ROI this will over the long term for your business. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Reflection. Think about what you imagine.